Are you prepared to retire with purpose? To retire knowing your savings is invested to meet unavoidable needs and expenses.
It's not how much we make during the good times, it's how much we keep during those really bad times.
Certified financial planner Casey Weade is president of Howard Bailey, an advisory firm that believes successful retirement begins with a detailed financial plan personalized to help achieve your life's purpose.
Whatever risk you faced, we've got a plan.
The Howard Bailey team is committed to practical financial planning so you can enjoy family and the future without uncertainty or stress. Stay tuned and learn how you too can retire with purpose.
Welcome back to the program. I am Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade, certified financial planner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. You know, it's a funny thing about household expenses. I know exactly what I pay for my cell phone, the water bill, that kind of stuff, but there's a major expense that many people just don't have a handle on.
Yeah, that's their 401k fees,
Yeah.
Or really just any type of investment fee or charge for that matter. And there was a recent article that was put out as part of the weekend reading for retirees I send out to the families we work with and those of you that sign up. And it was an article on 401k fees and the hidden fees and expenses. And it really started with a survey that found that only 27% of respondents knew what they were paying in the way of fees and expenses inside their 401k, while 95% of those same respondents knew what they were paying for streaming media services like Hulu or Netflix. And think about how big a deal that is. I've had many families come in that say, well, why would I hire anybody? Because I'm not paying anything in my 401k. And the reality is you are. You're paying a heck of a lot more for your 401k than you are for streaming media services like Netflix and Hulu. I mean, if we're talking about Netflix, what's that, $7.99 a month? Hulu, $5.99 a month? Well, inside of your 401k, it could easily be $3,500 a year. It could be $35,000 a year. Now you're paying hundreds of dollars a month, and that could be one of the biggest risks to your long-term success on actually getting yourself to retirement, on accumulating enough assets to get yourself to retirement, and we're ignoring it. We don't know what that actually is, and it's a massive deal, and it's something we really need to understand if we want to make sure our money lasts the rest of our life. We have to make sure we actually have enough in the first place.
So that's why Casey included it in the weekend reading for retirees and pre-retirees. And you can just go to the retirewithpurpose.com website, sign up there. You'll get one email once a week, and no spam, no sales. Right?
That's right. We'll have 4 articles directly from my desktop to your inbox that'll come to you every single Friday that breaks down concepts that can help you keep more money in your pocket where it belongs, largely based on what's going on in current events, helping you sift through all the garbage that's out there so you can really get factual articles that you can act upon.
So I could be paying thousands of dollars a year in these fees, and it's not just one fee, right? There's a big stack of them.
Oh, yeah. And the article went on to explain what these fees typically are, and we're just talking about 401ks here, right? So you haven't even received any financial advice at this point. Nobody's actually conducted a comprehensive financial review or put together a comprehensive financial plan, and yet you're still paying fees as if you were working with a financial planner in many instances. They showed that large plans have on average fees that are below 1%. And when you think of a large plan, I mean large, right? We're talking tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars. So these are the massive plans. The biggest plans have the most buying power, and they typically are more concerned with regulations and making sure that they stay themselves out of trouble. So you'll see these average fees below 1%. But the majority of these plans are not these large plans. The majority of them would be called small plans. And when I say small, I don't mean a couple $100,000. You could have a few $1,000,000 in a plan and that still be considered a small plan by 401k size standards. And those small plans on average has fees that are ranging between 1.5% and 2% a year. And some plans, as the article stated, have fees and expenses that all included are in excess of 3.5% a year. That is, let's just put it in dollars and cents for you. If we've got a $500,000 account, the fees are 3% a year. It's $15,000 a year. Over 10 years, that's $150,000. And over your working career, we're talking about nearly $500,000. But if we had actually had compounding on that, compounding returns on all those fees that we lost, it could be twice that.
You could be putting that money into paying for professional advice and management, but right now it's just going to administrative fees and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to understand what we're paying, and you may decide after you actually understand what you're paying that, well, maybe I shouldn't be making as large a contribution to the 401k, maybe I should be contributing to other types of retirement plans outside of the workplace, or at the very least bringing this to my employer's attention and saying, hey, the associates over at Howard Bailey X-rate our 401k, and now you can see in black and white what you're doing to us, because it's creating a lot of liability for the employer as well. And there's all types of different fees that get jammed inside there, because 401ks are very complex vehicles. Yeah, they have a lot of regulations, IRS guidelines that have to be followed, and they have to do all this annual testing. All those things are not free. And so there are a lot of charges, everything from administrative fees to service charges. Sometimes there's advisory fees. If you have an advisor on the plan that meets with the plan participants or meets with the employer and helps guide the plan and ultimately implement the plan, those fees can be 0.25%, 0.5% or more per year just for that advisory fee. And then you can have account management fees. Maybe you're paying 0.5%, 1% a year for that company to manage your portfolio. Maybe it's Fidelity, they're helping to manage the portfolio and they're charging a fee. Well, then you also have, I think, the most difficult fee to locate is what am I actually paying inside of these funds that I'm actually investing in, right? Which are typically mutual funds. We're seeing more and more plans today offering index funds, ETFs, passive funds, but a lot of them are still offering mutual funds because there's revenue sharing agreements and all these things going on behind closed doors that are compounding these expenses. And sure, you can find what the expense ratio might be in the way of 12b1 fees. That's what most people are familiar with. And the Wall Street Journal did a study in 2016, and it also appeared in Forbes magazine in 2016. They found that the average U.S. equity-based mutual fund is costing you 1.5% a year. Well, on top of that, they have hidden expenses that are transaction charges. So the more actively traded that mutual fund is, the more times they're going to trade and turn over that portfolio throughout the year. Every time there's a trade, there's a charge. There's a commission that's created. Every time there's a charge, and you don't see that expense ratio, and you don't see the transaction charges. The Wall Street Journal said that on average doubles the cost of the average U.S. equity-based mutual fund. That means you might be paying 2-3% a year inside your funds. Tack on all those service and administrative charges, it can get very expensive very quickly. Now, that's not the norm, but it does exist.
This really lights you up. I can see that this really irritates you.
Well, absolutely. It's something that is going to be one of the biggest drags on retirement success in America, and we already know that the average retiree hasn't saved enough. The average pre-retiree hasn't saved enough to get to retirement, and it's because of all these little hands that are in the cookie jar that need to be removed. And I think we've done a lot of good work and movement towards that with new regulations and people just becoming aware of what they're paying in the first place. We've made some big strides, but boy, we can get a lot further along in cutting those fees and expenses. There's a lot of planners, advisors, 401k companies, mutual fund companies that are taking more than their fair share.
There are a lot of steps involved to try to figure out exactly what's going on in your portfolio and how much you're paying, but one of the easiest things you could do is to pick up the phone right now and give Howard Bailey a call, because they're going to offer you the opportunity for a complimentary review of exactly what are those fees and expenses hiding in your accounts. We'll take a look at taxes you might be paying that maybe you don't have to. There are opportunities to find a way to eliminate some of the risk in your portfolio, another big expense that could be biting away at your retirement. And then, is there a way to generate lifetime income you can't outlive? There may well be, and those are all things that you'll find out about if you jump on the phone right now and request a complimentary review of exactly what's going on in your portfolio by meeting with a member of the Howard Bailey team. Give that phone call right now. All right, we're going to be back in just a second, and we'll be taking questions from viewers. Stay with us.
At Howard Bailey Financial, every dollar has a purpose. We call it the purpose-based retirement. A certified financial planner will help you decide what you need your retirement money to do for you. We put together a written plan that puts your dollars exactly where you want them to be. And we put every dollar to work to maximize your retirement efficiency. For a higher level of insight and care, choose the purpose-based retirement from Howard Bailey Financial. Call us now to set a complimentary consultation.
It is the time of the program when we answer questions from viewers like you. We start in South Bend with Rick.
Casey, Can a Roth IRA technically be considered a liquid asset, given that you can get your contributions out if you've met the 5-year rule and are at least 59 and a half?
I believe yes. I don't think there's any reason not to treat your Roth IRA as a liquid account as long as you're keeping an eye out for how it's actually invested. I think that's the key. If you're treating it as an emergency fund, it darn sure shouldn't be in the stock market. It shouldn't be an S&P 500 ETF. It shouldn't be in a mutual fund because it has to be there when you need it most. It has to be there when you have your emergency. So it should be in, say, short-term fixed income, maybe money markets, savings accounts, maybe even a CD for that matter, as long as you're watching what your penalties are. You know, a lot of CDs have 6-month interest penalties, and that might be okay for a longer-term emergency fund. So I think a Roth is perfectly fine for that reason, which is why we've used it for families we've worked with in the past. I've got a couple that I've been working with over the last few years, and they were about 5 years out from retirement when they first came and visit with us, and everything was tucked into their 401k. They had very little in emergency funds, and everything was tax deferred. So being that everything was in their 401k, if they ever wanted to take $50,000 out or $10,000 out, it was going to create a large taxable event, forcing them into a higher tax bracket, maybe forcing them to pay more taxes on Social Security, potentially even increasing their Medicare premiums, depending on how large a distribution they actually took. And so what we said is, well, why don't we start setting aside $5,000 every year into a Roth IRA? We'll keep it invested very conservatively, and this can be your overflow emergency fund long term, because now we've got a place that actually gives us the ability to pull large chunks out. Maybe we could have set those funds aside in a savings account or a checking account, but now we've got a taxable account that we're going to get 1099s for every single year. Now we've got some place that's growing tax-free, and if they never use it for an emergency, they can leave it behind for their kids tax-free as well. So I think a Roth IRA can make a valid option for your emergency fund, but just be careful how it's invested.
All right, let's get to Angola and Marta and your question for Casey.
I'm thinking about working another 6 months so that I have a smooth transition into Medicare, but I really hate my job. Is it worth the wait?
Well, I guess how much do you really hate your job, Marta? And I think that is such a key. As you get closer to retirement, we're working with families all the time to just get them to spend some money. You've worked your entire life to retire and enjoy it, so enjoy it. Spend those dollars and try to put together a plan so that you can actually live the lifestyle you've always dreamed of for the first 5 or 10 years of retirement at a bare minimum. And it's very difficult to start spending that money because you've been in saving mode your entire life. Now, when it comes to this point in life, whether it's waiting on a pension, waiting on Social Security benefits, or in your case, waiting on Medicare to kick in, I think you have to think about, well, how much is it really going to cost me to go ahead and step aside? Let's say it's $600 a month for your health insurance, for instance. Well, that's $7,200 a year, right? If it was a full year, maybe it's not 6 months, maybe it's 12 months that you're going to have to come up with these dollars to pay for your health insurance. Well, is it worth $7,000 to have an extra year to really enjoy and live your dreams and do the things that you've always wanted to do and get out of something that you absolutely hate? I think it might be. I think a good exercise is to say, well, go to the end of your life. And this is something that we did on our podcast recently, Retire with Purpose, with an author, a New York Times bestselling author, John Leland. He did a study working with individuals about happiness later in life, and he said, start living your happy life today. Don't wait until you're 80 and 90. And he found that the best way to do this is kind of like playing chess. There's so many moves on the board, you can't just start moving. Go look forward to when you're 85, 90 and say, what's going to be important to me at that time in my life? And how much would I pay? Would I pay $7,000 to have one more really healthy year of fun and entertainment and time with my family? You might start thinking twice about that extra 6 months of working in a job you hate.
That is a good way to think about it. Yeah. Let's get to email question from Gladys. Are long-term care benefit annuities easier to qualify for than traditional long-term care insurance?
Absolutely, Gladys. In most instances, when it comes to a long-term care annuity, which, these are relatively new vehicles. I mean, they've been around for quite some time, but relatively new in comparison to, say, traditional long-term care insurance. Now you have a lot of these hybrid options like a long-term care-based annuity, and these options give you some growth in your principal. They preserve your principal to say, pass on to the next generation. There's usually a death benefit, and then there's a long-term care benefit if you ever need it that multiplies the value of your account or the income you're going to get from that account. And they can be good tools, but they're usually not going to provide as good of a benefit as traditional long-term care insurance, maybe even a hybrid approach using some type of life insurance structure, but they're much easier to qualify for. You're usually maybe going to have a questionnaire that you need to complete before qualifying, and in many instances, some of these carriers won't even require you to actually go through any type of even questionnaire, let alone going through a physical exam for that matter, and doing any blood work or tests like that. So it's usually very easy to qualify for, but that's why the benefits are typically a little bit lower, and those benefits tend to grow over time. So they know that the people that are signing up for these types of things, where the benefits are going to be lower, and it means they probably can't qualify for traditional long-term care insurance. It's their biggest risk, so they're going to let those benefits grow over time. They're not going to be as big up front, and they're going to grow each and every year to where, well, once you get to the point where you really need the care, it might provide an equivalent benefit as you had with a traditional long-term care policy or a hybrid policy for that matter. I have a gentleman that we worked with that was 67 years old, went through a couple bouts of cancer and could not qualify for traditional long-term care coverage. We carved out a portion of his portfolio to set aside a long-term care benefit annuity that would grow over time and provide substantial income to him and his spouse if he ever had home health care, assisted living, nursing home care. There was no questionnaire, there was no exam. It's not right for everybody, but really spending some time to understand all of your options is the best thing that you can do, whether it comes to your investments, your insurance, your taxes, your estate planning, all facets of your financial life. You need to spend some time to understand all of your options so that you can make the best decision for yourself.
And if you have a question you'd like to get it to Casey, the easiest thing to do is just go to retirewithpurpose.com, and you'll see a little Ask Casey link there, and you can shoot him a question and we might pull it out and use it here on the program. Of course, you can always find out more about what's going on in your retirement plan by making a phone call to the number on your screen and request a complimentary assessment of exactly what's happening in your retirement life. We'll take a look at fees and expenses you might be paying, taxes that possibly you could avoid. Is there risk in your portfolio that could drag you down in the future if the market turns itself upside down? And then what about a long-term income strategy, income you can't outlive? All things you'll cover in that complimentary review of exactly what's going on in your retirement world, and you can get that by just calling the number on your screen. You meet with Casey, a member of the Howard Bailey team. All right, here's our question of the day, and it has to deal with exactly that. How many people have a formal written retirement income plan? We'll have the answer when we come back.
At Howard Bailey Financial, every dollar has a purpose. We call it the purpose-based retirement. A certified financial planner will help you decide what you need your retirement money to do for you. We put together a written plan that puts your dollars exactly where you want them to be. And we put every dollar to work to maximize your retirement efficiency. For a higher level of insight and care, choose the purpose-based retirement from Howard Bailey Financial. Call us now to set a complimentary consultation.
Okay, heading into the break, we asked you the question, what's the percentage of retirees who have a formal written retirement income plan? Casey?
Well, Lee, the answer is B, 35%. And I think what's more surprising is that those that are actually working with a financial advisor are only 38%. So 38% of those individuals that have a financial advisor have a formal written retirement income plan. And that's surprising to me, given that running out of money during retirement is the #1 concern of retirees. Retirees have been surveyed and found that 42% of those found running out of money during during retirement to be their #1 concern, and that tells me that there's a huge gap in the world of financial advice, and we're not addressing the biggest concern that families have. At Howard Bailey, we address that concern with a comprehensive written plan that not only covers your income strategy, but the gaps and the major risks that may come along the way, whether that's market risk, whether that's emergencies, whether that's inflation, or your estate for that matter. And when it comes to estate planning, that also includes major healthcare costs. I want to walk you through an example of a family we were able to implement a comprehensive retirement income plan for. So this couple is 60 and 58. One is an engineer, one is a medical assistant. They have an IRA valued at $600,000, after-tax funds of $400,000, and their big concern was that not that they wanted to retire today, but they may be forced into retirement early. They ultimately wanted to retire at 65 years old, but they were concerned that with that risk of being forced into retirement early, would they have a plan that would be able to carry them through those next few years before they were able to pick up Medicare and Social Security? And hence, since then, they've actually been forced into retirement. So it actually did happen. Luckily, we had an income plan, we had a comprehensive plan that kicked into action so that they didn't have to worry about their finances as they went through a tumultuous time in their lives. They also wanted to reduce their market risk. They felt that the bull market had been on such a tear that eventually we were going to have some type of pullback, and they remembered what it felt like going through the 2008 financial crisis, and they said, if we go through that today, right now, and we're forced into retirement, then we're going to be in a very difficult situation, one in which we may not even be able to find a job that we can get back into in order to carry us through these next few years. And lastly, they had some long-term care experience. They were concerned about long-term care expenses, home health care, assisted living, nursing home care, and they were kind of in that sweet spot. Having somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million in assets is usually those individuals that need to have some type of formal long-term care strategy. If we have more assets than that, many times we might be able to self-insure. If we have less assets than that, then we might be able to more easily qualify for Medicaid without leaving anybody in our family destitute or dependent on to take for that care. So let's walk through the plan that we structured, starting with our fixed income alternative. We structured a fixed income alternative, carving out $350,000 of their IRA in order to use that for long-term income needs. However, we also may need to start drawing off of this if they are forced into retirement early. And we wanted a principal protected place that avoided any interest rate risk and gave us some upside potential. We get 50% participation in the market's gains every year. Our gains lock in annually, and we can draw income from this account periodically. Your IRA should ultimately be used for retirement income drawn out a little bit each year and slowly over time in order to reduce what the impact of RMDs is going to be long term, and to make sure you don't take too large of a chunk that might force you into a higher marginal tax bracket. Well, once we took care of that income need that they had today, we might also want to fill that gap they had between ages 60 and 65 or 58 and 65 with additional income that would supplement the dollars they were getting from their traditional IRA. We set aside $300,000 of after-tax funds to give us some flexibility in those supplemental income years. And we carved that portfolio out and set it aside in a portfolio that would be risk level of 64. So about a moderate risk level, a little bit more conservative than where they found themselves prior. And this also is a very diversified portfolio mix of domestic equities, international equities, commodities, real estate, etc. Well, once we took care of their immediate and long-term income needs or supplemental income needs, now we needed to make sure they had more income in the future than they started with. If they had inflation, which we all will experience inflation at some point throughout our lives, that are going to cause pressures on our purchasing power. And so we're going to need additional dollars to supplement the income we started retirement with. We set aside the remaining value of their IRA for long-term growth in a more aggressive allocation that gave them higher equity exposure and commodity exposure. We can see that the risk level of that portfolio went from where it was relatively conservatively at 64 up to about a 78. Well, now we had taken care of their emergency funds, their long-term income needs, their supplemental income needs, and inflation needs. We had some funds left over. We were left with about $100,000 of their after-tax funds that we said, well, what are we going to use these dollars for? We've taken care of most of your major needs, and they said, well, most likely we'll pass on to our kids. That'll be our legacy we'll leave behind unless we need it for long-term care expenses. So let's find the closest distance between 2 points, a straight line, right, between point A and point B, and that being estate planning, long-term care protection. We set aside $100,000 in a long-term care product and a long-term care hybrid policy that would give them $7,000 a month in long-term care protection if they needed it, and it would continue for as long as they needed the care, providing them an unlimited long-term care pool at a cost of about $250 a month, $3,000 a year. So this helped fill that long-term care gap, and if they ever changed their mind and needed the funds back, they would be able to have those funds back with some growth, and ultimately if they never needed the long-term care in the first place, there would be a death benefit that would pass on tax-free to their heirs. So what did we do? Well, we filled 4 different main areas of their plan, and we started with setting that foundation by setting aside funds as a fixed income alternative, really as a foundation to create the income they would need long term regardless of what happened in the market. We set aside $300,000 for supplemental income needs. Between now and the time they thought they would actually retire at age 65, we carved out $250,000 to be there for long-term growth and inflation protection, leaving us with $100,000 for estate protection, mainly to satisfy potential health care costs in the future, but if not, a tax-free death benefit to be left behind as a legacy to their heirs.
Okay, see, how many of your families that you work with actually do leave with a written plan like this?
Well, you know, not everybody that comes in to visit with us is the right fit. And we can't possibly work with every single person that comes into our office. And you know, I mean, we have 70 to 100 people walking into our office every week. We can't work with each and every one of them. And on average, about 40% of them will end up entrusting us with their life savings for the rest of their lives, but not everyone, because we're not the right fit. Maybe we can't provide value. Maybe we can't figure out a good fit from a chemistry perspective, which is such an important thing to make sure the person you're working with today is going to be someone you're going to look forward to working with the rest of your life. You know, it's not always the case, but 9 out of 10 times we end up finding somewhere where we can fill a gap in their planning. And typically these are just simple tax recommendations and guidance that maybe comes from just, well, let's switch out this fund or that fund. A lot of times we'll have folks that come in with a 401k and they say, you know, I'd really like to have this allocated and know that I'm set up properly so that I'm going to be able to get to retirement some date in the future. Well, maybe we can't work with that person at this point, but we can still provide them with some guidance to get them to where they want to be so that maybe some point in the future we can work together. And typically that happens in the second visit or the third visit when we start to actually deliver that written plan that follows a lot of these principles.
So give me an example, give me an idea of who is the best fit.
Yeah. Well, I think chemistry and likability is the most important thing. And so individuals that want to come in and create a long-term relationship and are ready to really dive in and make this a partnership. I don't like telling people what to do with their money. I want to be here to provide the appropriate education and guidance and then ultimately make that decision as a team. So I want someone to come in that's looking to create a broad-based plan that's not just looking for another product or a mutual fund or a long-term care policy or a life insurance policy. You can run down to the local brokerage down the street and they'll sell you a product and let you be on your way. We're looking for long-term relationships where we can create real value by creating a comprehensive, broad-based plan.
And you can always sign up for Weekend Reading for Retirees, order a book, or schedule an appointment at retirewithpurpose.com. We'll see you next week.